So this week, down at the General Assembly, we saw some action on the North Carolina Farm Act of 2023. It had its first votes in the House Agriculture Committee. Last week, it was up for discussion only, and there was a lot of discussion on that. So this week, they passed a few amendments and then moved it through committee. So why don't we talk about those?
Sure. So the first three amendments that they added during House Ag Committee this week were revise the aquaculture general permit. It requires the Department of Environmental Quality to reopen the National Pollutant Discharge Elimination System (NPDES) general permit that's issued for aquatic animal operations that took effect back in December of 2021. The legislation directs DEQ to match the general permit issued in previous years that was less burdensome to our trout farmers. Then they also added a section for the North Carolina Farmer Appreciation Day. It designates the second Wednesday in November of each year as North Carolina Farmers Appreciation Day, and that's starting next year in 2024. And North Carolina Farm Bureau is named as one of the agricultural groups to raise awareness and help promote the annual event. And then an amendment to the well drilling provision was added to allow retired well drillers to get back into the profession after they retire. And there were a few more, so I'll kick it over to you, Stacy, to explain those.
Sure. So some additional provisions that were added. One amendment changed the fees charged for animal waste management to be consistent with wastewater operator fees. Additional changes were made that would clarify a section creating penalties for leaving the scene of an animal waste spill. So that provision, importantly, does not apply to livestock or poultry waste or feathers that are generated by live animals. So that's mainly directed at like rendering trucks. Finally, a provision was also added to allow farm equipment operators the same legal defense as motorcycle drivers when their equipment is not able to trigger the inductive loop at an intersection controlled by a vehicle-actuated traffic signal, and the operator finds it necessary to proceed through a red light.
Can you explain that provision for those of us who are not attorneys, Stacy?
Sure. So it's a whole lot simpler than it sounded. Basically, when you pull up to a red light that has a sensor in the ground, and the red light won't change unless it knows that a car is sitting there at the light, a motorcycle isn't heavy enough to trigger that sensor. So there's a provision in law that allows them, under certain circumstances, to proceed through a red light. We're also having that challenge with some of our farm equipment, and so this provision just allows the farm equipment operators that same flexibility.
Awesome. Thanks.
So those were the rest of the amendments that we wanted to highlight. What do we have coming up next?
So budget negotiations between the House and the Senate are still underway. And as a reminder, the final version, when they release that, it will be in the form of a conference report, meaning no changes can be made to that legislation once it's released for a vote. And I guess next week you can expect to see us back with a lot more to report. There's a lot of bills moving right now because we expect this month may be the final month of long session.